Hi, everybody. Mr. Brennan here. Was going to share with you Introduction to Psych today. I wish I had you guys in class for this because we do have a lot of fun with it. We do a psychology speed dating activity. Obviously, that's not possible right now. So we're going to try to reduce it down to a lecture to its simplest parts before we can meet in class and kind of do more of that kind of engaging type of activity that we all like to do when we're in the classroom. But the first thing we're going to do here is I'm going to show you where you're going to go in order to take notes during this. So I'm going to share my screen real quick with you. And I'm going to hop over to the Introduction to Psych chart here that you'll see. So in here, what you want to understand is I did it in PowerPoint. You're like, why would this guy do this in PowerPoint? Pretty simple and straightforward. The reason here being is that Word Online doesn't allow you to use text boxes and it messes up the format. So if you guys wanted to take notes into something as we went, if you used Word Online, it'd be all messed up. Everybody would have to download it and use the desktop version of Word, then re-upload it. PowerPoint doesn't have that. So PowerPoint, the text boxes are here. So my lecture is going to go right along with this. You can zoom in as much as you need to in order to, take the proper notes here as my video is going. And you can see everything has text box there. So you can just enter your stuff. You can, of course, arrange it however you want to, format it, use whatever font you want. But it's real easy just to get the information in there using that particular application here, in this case PowerPoint rather than Word. If later in the year we're like, we want to use Word, we want to download it, that's fine too. If you want PDF version and you just want to write on it, that's fine too if you have a tablet. So we'll figure that out as we go. It's not going to be the biggest deal in the world in order to update that, and I'll be more than flexible with it. So with that being said, it's going to be time to get going here. So I'll open up what we're doing. This should take you about a half hour when all is said and done. I'll try to engage you as much as possible with what we're doing. So let me share my content here and let me get into my smartboard here. So I always start with a joke of the day. Today's joke of the day: secretary to psychologist, doctor, there is a patient here who thinks he is invisible. Answer: tell him I can't see him right now. Wonderful. Perfect. You'll get one every day. They will get lamer and lamer. You will learn to love them. You will learn not to critique them, because if you do, you will be responsible for the next joke of the day. One of the things I want to hit on early here, though, as we go through, is in psychology, there's no such thing as crazy. This is the Hear Johnny scene from The Shining, but we don't use the term crazy if we're going to describe somebody. And that's going to be so important as we go through the year. That is not a psychological diagnosis. Therefore, we try to avoid using it at all costs in our class. And in the past, it hasn't been an issue, and we've done a really good job with it. So let's roll with what is psychology. And you see on your screen where it is that you have to fill in with what is psychology. You can do it right up top. Now, I'm going to tell people these first two units are pretty boring. They're bio heavy. If you like bio, great for you. The first is really research methods heavy. If you like that, good for you. But otherwise, just hang tight with this until about October, because then it is going to get incredibly interesting as we go through. First thing, what is psychology? It is the study of mental behavior and mental processes. So important for us to understand that it's twofold here, people. Twofold. So behavior are going to be things that we can outwardly see, and mental processes, things we can't see. And the history of psychology has been this tug of war back and forth between the two of them. And in the end, it's really probably the answer lies somewhere in the middle that is made up of both. Other things super important. The AP, for some reason, loves this, so I'm going to include this. Psychology is both humans and animals, so study it both. Now, in this class, we do very little animal behavior. If that's what you want, there, of course, learning in our fifth unit, but otherwise we're really focused on humans within this particular class. Feel free at any time when you're copying down this information to freeze the screen, freeze the video to get down the necessary information you need. So here we are. You have this in yours. I have this in mine. This is where if you had updated your teams to make sure the new window open, this is great because you can toggle between both. If not, you might have to stop the video, go into the online version of PowerPoint, and then start typing away. But I think we'll be just fine here. So I got to get my eraser up, okay? And as we go through, I'll reveal what I need to reveal. So it says psychology is a systematic scientific study of behaviors and mental processes. Well, we need to understand that behaviors are these outward, overt actions and reactions, things that we can see, talking, expressions, movement, all become a part of this. Whereas our mental processes are internal covert things, activity of the mind, things like thinking, feeling, remembering, computing. They have, you can't see it, but it is going on at that time. So psychology is, of course, made up of both of these. One of the biggest things is the goals of psychology. The first is we want to describe. So we want to describe what is happening here. So, student at CHS, we see them and they're crying in the hallway. Well, we want to be able to describe that. What does that crying look like? So we can describe it across psychology. And is crying, we have to be very detailed about our approach. How are they crying? What does it look like? So we can describe it not only to those who are in the event in CHS, but also the people that are not, so that our research can eventually, or whatever we're looking at, can be duplicated. So we're speaking the same language as a psychologist in New York, as a psychologist in California, Alabama, North Dakota, China. It doesn't make a difference. We all are seeing it the same way. Second thing is we want to predict, okay? CHS student is crying in the hallway. We want to be able to say, well, will this happen again? And if so, what is going to trigger this happening? And you can imagine these goals when we start talking about the various, areas of psych during the course of the year. Next thing, we want to explain it, right? So not only when is it happening, but again, why is it happening? Are there certain things that preceded it that are going to lead to it? With the last goal, they all lead to this, is control. Can we actually change the behavior or the mental thought that is taking place? That's going to be the goal of psychology. It's the goal of therapy, whether it be behavioral therapy or cognitive therapy, working on our behaviors or our mental processes. Can we control it? Can it be changed in the end? And in order to do that, we have to be able to describe it. We have to be able to predict it. We have to be able to explain it. And then hopefully get to that point through research, controlled research, where we can control a particular behavior or mental process that is taking place. All right, so history and approaches here. This is one of, I'm just going to let you know, this is one of the more difficult things, and do not get wrapped up in it, people. Okay? Structuralism versus functionalism. They are both dead. They are no longer accepted theories of psychology and approaches. So if you get hung up on it, man, that's your fault. Don't do it. I'm telling you that right now, okay? So let's just understand them in their most basic elements. So structuralism is developed by Wilhelm Wundt. He is going to create the first psych lab actually in Germany. And what he was interested in is he was interested in the actual structure of the mind. He wanted to know, okay, what were the various areas of the mind? Number one, like where were they at? And then basically using introspection, he wanted to look within for answers. So he used this thing called introspection, ask question, and look within for the answer, okay? This was opposed to what would come later on called functionalism. And let me get through both before I really break them down. I know right now you're probably like, what are you talking about? This was created by a guy named William James. Again, these are a couple of theories or historical approaches to psychology. And what he came up with was the importance of these structures to your everyday life. So he wanted to know, what is the function of the structures of the mind? What are they doing? What are they helping us with, hindering us with? Why are they there? What is their function or their purpose? And I probably didn't make it any better right then by describing it that particular way. But, okay, if I show you this kind of puzzle thing in class, what I would do is I would hand out puzzles to kids, and I would say, if we were taking a structural approach to it, what we would do is we would look at the individual puzzle pieces that are there, and we would say, all right, this is a puzzle piece, and we just start trying to mash them together, and it doesn't really serve a purpose. We all know that as part of a puzzle, but we're not looking any deeper at it. And then what I would do is I would have kids take a functionalist approach, where we'd take the puzzle piece, we'd look at it, and we understand, yeah, it's a puzzle piece, okay, but what is it, a corner piece? Is it a middle piece? Okay, and in that way, it was much easier to construct the puzzle. So essentially what functionalism was doing is it was looking at these individual structures in the mind, but saying, yeah, but what is their purpose overall? Now, these two schools of psychology have kind of died out. They were the beginnings of cognitive psychology, or the psychology that you couldn't see, but we've really built upon them over the course of time. So kind of cool. And the other way I describe it is if you were to have a medicine cabinet, so you open your medicine cabinet, you look in, and you say to yourself, okay, structuralism would say, well, what's in there? Is there a razor blade? Is there toothpaste? Is there shaving cream? Is there a toothbrush? And we're just looking at the surface of it, okay, if it were like the mind. A functionalist would go in there and say, well, what's the function of each of these things? You know, why is there the toothbrush there? What is the toothpaste for? What is the razor for? So we're looking a little bit deeper at it. Nonetheless, you can't get hung up on this. I mean, I could tell you probably that if you asked 9 out of 10 psychology teachers in America, I'm not sure they would be able to properly explain it to you or even fully grasp it themselves. And that's kind of why the theories themselves died out over the course of time. All right. So next came Gestalt psychology. It was another form of cognitive psychology. It developed by a guy, Max Wertheimer. And he looked at basically, well, this is how the mind works. Did a really interesting job with this. And one of the things that he was able to come up with was this idea of Gestalt psychology, or the organized whole rather than individual parts. And he came up with a theory called, a concept called patterns of thought. And what he realized is that in people, humans, what separates them from other animals a lot of times is our ability to make very quick decisions. The human mind is made, it's there to protect and help us survive. So what he said is we see the whole. We don't see individual parts to things. Really cool idea. So that we can make quick judgments that keep us alive. Now, what he said is sometimes they're faulty because we miss the individual details, but that's not how we think. Max Wertheimer was talking about what we call top-down processing, where it starts by seeing the whole view from the top, like an aerial view, and then breaking it down into its individual pieces eventually, versus a bottom-up view where you take the individual pieces first and then match them together. The best way I can explain this is by looking at logos and other things we've done. So here are Gestalt examples. Okay, here, this is not complete, yet we know that this says 8, right? Through the incomplete 8s, we are able to see the word 8. Our mind completes these patterns for us. It fills in the blanks. That's Gestalt psychology. It takes all of our experiences from the past and it allows us to make a quick explanation as to what's going on and a quick assessment. We use Gestalt psychology more and more as you get older, as you build upon your experiences. So a couple of cool things we might not have seen in the past. Normally, what will happen is here, if your mind makes a quick reaction, you see one of two things. If you pull the black surface to the forefront and push the white into the background, you're going to see a wine chalice. If you pull the white into the forefront, you're going to see two people kind of squaring off, facing off, maybe ready to smooch. The point that Max Wertheimer was making, or when you use this for his point, was you probably only saw one of them at first. And that's because we didn't look at the individual parts. We looked at the whole, we made a quick judgment, our mind was satisfied, and we moved on. Really cool stuff. So to see both, you would have to break it down into its individual pieces. Are we capable of it as humans? Absolutely. But we have to consciously do it because the mind wants to complete activities. Same thing here. You're either going to look at this really quick and you're only going to see the side profile of a young lady, or you are going to see an old lady in the picture. Very few of us are going to be able to see both as hard as we try. That's because the mind, it makes up its mind, it sees the whole picture, and it doesn't allow us to go back. Kind of really cool stuff here. It also allows us, see, I use this example, this is excellent, okay? We can read things because letters can be jumbled all over. Again, this is Gestalt psychology. All that really matters is the first and the last letter in the word. If they are in place, we can read through scrambled stuff because when we read based off of experience, and we're truthfully only reading the first and last letter in many cases as we build upon that experience. That's why as you get older, the more you read, the quicker you can read, because your mind doesn't have to break it down into the individual letters, okay? So when you read this, you'll see, is text-only sight ideal for someone with a reading disability? Hardly. Images are not accessible. They actually increase comprehension, okay? And you can see, you can actually read this. If I go on to the second paragraph, what many people do not know, though, is there is much more at the accessibility for an image than just its text. Now, you can see I can roll through this. It slowed me down. It did, but I can do this because of the Gestalt psychology that takes place. As long as the first and last letter are kind of in place, I can decipher. It also, Gestalt psychology, as I said, it's really, you might not realize a lot of the most popular logos and emblems around, you miss key details. You see FedEx here, but we don't break it down into its pieces, so you might not notice the arrow here because FedEx is always moving forward. Again, we miss the details because we're looking at the whole picture, trying to make quick judgment decisions. Hershey Kisses, yeah, we've all seen it. But if you look over here, you can see there's actually a kiss embedded between the K and the I that would allow us to know what the inside of that Hershey's Kiss looks like without ever undoing the wrapper. The Milwaukee Brewers baseball symbol, you might miss it. The M in Milwaukee, the B in Brewers, it's there. You might just see a baseball mitt for the reason of Gestalt psychology again. The Atlanta Falcons, the Falcon is actually in an F for Falcon, okay? Amazon, like, oh, that's cute, it's a smiley face. No, no, no. Amazon has every product for you from A all the way to Z. We miss those connections because we're looking at the whole rather than the individual pieces. Wendy's, it's good home cooking, just like mom would make. If you look at Wendy's necklace, that wasn't done unintentionally, okay? Look, mom, it spells out. Now we miss it as we go by, but again, eventually we can get the individual details. Baskin Robbins, looks pretty cool. How many flavors do they have? 31 flavors. Tostitos, always a party, right? If you look to the middle here, it's not just dot and the I in Tostitos. You got a couple of people hanging out here having some chips and salsa. Often people miss that. Hope for African Children Initiative. You see the continent of Africa, but you might miss the child facing the adult here if you pull them to the forefront. Moreover, the Bronx Zoo, great emblem, but can you see the New York City skyline that's there in between the legs? Something we miss because of Gestalt psychology. Going back real quick here, guys, as we go through. I want to be able to go back and cover the last one here. So for a while, cognitive psychology dominated the field. But after a while, behavioralists kind of swung the pendulum in a pretty big fashion the other way where they said, you can't do this stuff with the mind. Yeah, you can't. Okay, it has to be stuff that we can observe. That's what makes it a science. So we had guys like Pavlov and Pavlov's dogs, and John Watson that we'll talk about that focused on observable learned behavior. When we come back together as a class, I'm going to show you a couple of video clips that are going to demonstrate Pavlov and Watson. So really good stuff to look forward to. But understand in the beginning, these first three approaches, structuralism, functionalism, and Gestalt, all kind of building on each other, are about cognitive psychology or things we can see, behavioralism, overt things that we can see, okay? Over here, I meant things that we can't see. Structuralism, functionalism, obsolete, no longer accepted fields of psychology, okay? But we want to look at the historical development. It is important. Okay, as we go back through this real quick, brings us to all our approaches. So what do I mean by approaches? These are different lenses through which we look at psychology. Really important stuff, okay? So I just want to take a minute to go through all of it. And really, you're like, Brennan, this is going so fast. No. Each of these is literally going to become almost an individual unit during the course of the year for us. We are going to spend weeks, if not months, on each of these topics. But right here, we're just laying out kind of like a poo-poo platter, a sampling of the various fields of psychology and the lens by which they look at human behavior and mental processes. So the biological approach, also called biopsychology, it looks at neuroscience, guys, right off the start. They believe that human behavior and thought is the direct result of events in the body. And if you want to write this down, you can. But they truly believe that the way we think and the way we act is directly tied to neurotransmitters that we release in the body, things like serotonin, norepinephrine, dopamine, etc., and also hormones that are released throughout the body. And that is what causes behaviors to happen and us to think the way we think. Cognitive psychology focuses on how people think, okay? But how they remember, how they store information, how they sort it, how they use it. And things that fall under cognitive psychology that we look at this year, we're going to look at cognition, yes, but we look at memory in detail. We look at intelligence in detail. These are not things that you can see, okay? But for these individuals, the mind is what controls psychology. And you can throw Gestalt right in there. It's still around a cognitive approach to psychology. Structuralism, functionalism, they were cognitive approaches that are now obsolete. The behavioral approach is one that we kind of talked about there just a couple of minutes ago. Behaviors are learned through association or reinforcement and punishment. So here's where we find like our classical conditioning, like with Pavlov, who used the bell to condition dogs, or reinforcement. So, adding something positive to a situation to get a behavior to be what it is, or punishment, adding something negative, taking away something positive to get us to a particular behavior. And behavioral psychology is all about we can mold someone's behavior through association, through reinforcement, through punishment. Evolutionary psychology, right away, you think of Darwin. This won't be its own unit, but we'll bring it up a couple of times throughout the year. And what it focuses on, just like Darwin and evolution, evolutionary psychology says, listen, there are traits of the human mind and behaviors that are going to be passed from one generation to the next. The ones that are useful for our survival are the ones that will make their way and that we all share. The ones that aren't useful or actually hinder our particular survival will eventually, through evolution, make their way out of humans. Here, when we look at Freud, okay, this is our psychodynamic or psychoanalytic approach to psychology. This is all about the unconscious mind here. Sigmund Freud is going to be the big guy. Much of this work is going to be, of his work at least, is going to be proven to be incorrect, not provable, not empirically based, I guess would be what you could say. But for him in here, so our actions, our behaviors are all driven by our unconscious mind. Things that we are not aware of that are happening, these battles that are taking place in the mind. Our humanistic approach is going to focus on creating the best version of people. It's called positive psychology. So it used to be psychology was used and entrenched and based in the idea that it was for people who had neuroses, the people who had psychological problems, people who were struggling. Well, the humanistic approach says, heck no. We are going to look at how can we make the optimal best version of a human being, of ourselves. How can we go, maybe we are a 7. How can we make ourselves a 10? How can we make ourselves more happy? Abraham Maslow is going to be the father of that brand of psychology, but positive psychology is an emerging field. It's gaining a ton of traction and popularity throughout the world. And why? Because what it's saying is psychology isn't just for those who are struggling mentally, behavioral-wise, etc. It's for everybody, and it can help improve everybody along the way. Social-cultural approach, it looks like, how does society, how do our peers, how does that impact how we think? How does that impact our behavior? So kind of interesting to see. Social psychology will probably be your most interesting topic this year for many students. They love it. And our biopsychosocial approach, aka our mixed approach, what that's going to say is probably, this is the modern idea, when people battle back and forth as to what psychology is, the biopsychosocial or mixed approach is going to say, you know what, it's probably a combination of most of this stuff. There's no one thing that should dominate everything. So remember, when we talk about what our definition of psychology is, it's mental processes along with behaviors or things we can see. And each of these approaches just looks at it differently. You know, again, biological, our mental processes and our behaviors are going to be controlled and dictated by the body and the body's chemistry. Cognitive approach is going to be dictated by the mind, things we can't see. The behavioral approach is really going to be dictated and manipulated and changed by things we can see, tangible things that are there. Evolutionary says, guess what? Those things are going to be based off of what's useful for us and gets passed from one generation to the other. Psychoanalytic is going to say, you know what? Our behaviors and our mental processes are going to be controlled by our unconscious minds, things that are pushed so far down we're not even aware of them. A humanistic approach is going to say, you know, we can all, through altering our personalities and looking for the best version of ourselves, are going to positively impact both our mental processes and behaviors. Sociocultural is going to say our peers and our culture and our society is going to impact how we think and how we act. And biopsychosocial is going to say where most psychologists today live and say this is the answer. It's a mixing of all these that determines how we think and how we act. I'll stop sharing my screen now. Guys, okay, thank you so much for listening here. If you have any questions, feel free to email me along the way. And you guys have a great day. Thanks so much. Bye.